When I was hospitalized for heart problems, no one came to visit me. My son called saying he was too busy, and my daughter said life was much better without me. The shock came the next day when the TV announced the winner of the $37 million prize. The greedy ones called me 46 times. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. The steady beeping of the heart monitor was the only companion I had in that sterile hospital room. At 63 years old, I never imagined I'd be lying here alone, staring at white ceiling tiles while recovering from what the doctors called a significant cardiac event. The pain in my chest had nothing on the emptiness I felt watching other patients receive visitors throughout the day. My name is Benjamin, and I spent the last 25 years believing I was a good father. Maybe I was wrong. The attack happened on a Tuesday morning while I was fixing the leaky faucet in my kitchen. One moment I was tightening a pipe, the next I was on the floor, clutching my chest as waves of pain shot down my left arm. Mrs. Henderson from next door found me when she came to return a casserole dish. Thank God for nosy neighbors. Now, 3 days later, I was stable but still monitored. The cardiologist, Dr. Martinez, had been optimistic about my recovery, but stressed the importance of having family support during this time. Heart attacks are as much emotional as they are physical, she'd said. You'll need people around you. I reached for my phone with trembling fingers. The first call was to Marcus, my 35-year-old son. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice distant and distracted. Dad, what's up? I'm actually in the middle of something here. Marcus, I'm in the hospital. I had a heart attack. There was a pause, but not the kind filled with concern. It was the pause of someone calculating how much time this conversation would take. Oh, are you okay? I mean, obviously you're calling so you're not dead or anything? The casual way he said it hit me harder than the chest pains had. I'm stable, but the doctors want me monitored for a few more days. I was hoping you could. Dad, I really can't right now. We're launching a new campaign at work, and I've got back-to-back meetings all week. You understand, right? This is my career we're talking about. I understood. I understood that his career was more important than his father lying in a hospital bed. Of course, son, I just thought, look, I'll try to call you later, okay? Take care of yourself. The line went dead before I could say goodbye. I sat there holding the phone, remembering how I'd worked double shifts at the factory for 3 years to pay for Marcus's college tuition. How I'd driven 6 hours each way to watch him graduate, sitting alone in those bleachers because his mother had passed away 2 years earlier. How I'd helped him with the down payment on his first apartment, dipping into my retirement savings without hesitation. But that was then. This was now. My finger hovered over Sarah's number. My 32-year-old daughter had always been the more emotional one, the one who remembered birthdays and holidays. Surely she would be different. Hi, Dad. Her voice was flat, almost annoyed. What do you need? Sarah, honey, I'm in the hospital. I had a heart attack on Tuesday and... Are you serious right now? The irritation in her voice was unmistakable. Dad, do you have any idea what you put me through growing up? The constant worry about your health, your smoking, your terrible diet. I finally got to a place where I don't have to stress about you every day. My mouth went dry. Sarah, honestly, my life has been so much better without constantly worrying about you. I'm in therapy now, working through all the anxiety you caused me. My therapist says I need to establish boundaries with toxic relationships. Toxic relationships. Her own father was a toxic relationship. I just thought you should know where I am, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Well, now I know. Take care of yourself, Dad. I have to go. Emma has soccer practice and I can't be late again. The silence after she hung up was deafening. I set the phone on the bedside table and stared at it, as if somehow it would ring again and this would all be a misunderstanding. Maybe they'd call back, apologetic and concerned. Maybe they'd rush to the hospital with flowers and worried faces. But the phone stayed silent. A young nurse named Patricia came in to check my vitals. She was probably in her late 20s with kind eyes and a gentle smile that reminded me of Sarah when she was younger. Oh, how are you feeling today, Mr. Benjamin? She asked, wrapping the blood pressure cuff around my arm. I've been better, I said, trying to force a smile. I bet. Heart attacks are scary, but you're lucky to have such a supportive family. I saw your son and daughter listed as emergency contacts. I'm sure they'll be here soon." I nodded, not having the heart to tell her that my supportive family was too busy to visit their father in the hospital. They're very busy people. "Oh, I understand, but they'll make time for something this important. Family always does." As she finished taking my blood pressure, I heard laughter coming from the room next door. Through the thin walls, I could make out multiple voices, children giggling, adults talking in warm, concerned tones. The patient in that room was probably 10 years older than me, but his room was constantly filled with visitors. "Mr. Rodriguez next door has quite the family," Patricia said, noticing my attention. 7 grandchildren, 4 children, and they all take turns visiting. Never seen anything like it. Yesterday, his youngest granddaughter brought him a picture she drew of them dancing together. I felt something twist in my stomach. When was the last time I'd danced with anyone? When was the last time someone had drawn me a picture? "That's nice," I said quietly. Patricia finished her checks and headed toward the door. "You try to get some rest now, and don't worry. I'm sure your family will be here soon. They're probably just getting things organized at home." After she left, I lay there thinking about the years since my wife Margaret had died. How I'd tried so hard to be both mother and father to Marcus and Sarah. How I'd attended every school play, every graduation, every wedding. I'd walked Sarah down the aisle just 3 years ago, tears streaming down my face as I placed her hand in her husband David's. I remembered Marcus's wedding 5 years earlier. How proud I'd been giving that father of the groom speech. I'd talked about watching him grow from a boy who was afraid of the dark into a man who could light up any room he entered. Where was that man now? Where was the daughter who used to call me every Sunday just to check in? The afternoon dragged on. I watched the clock, thinking maybe they'd surprise me with an evening visit. Maybe they were just processing the news, making arrangements to come see me. But visiting hours ended at 8 p.m., and I was still alone. That night, as I lay in the dark listening to the sounds of the hospital around me, I realized something that chilled me more than any diagnosis could. My children didn't just fail to visit me, they didn't want to visit me. Sarah had made it clear that her life was better without me in it. Marcus had prioritized work meetings over his father's health crisis. I closed my eyes and tried to remember when things had changed. When had I become a burden instead of a beloved father? When had my love become something they wanted to escape from rather than something they cherished? The heart monitor continued its steady beeping, marking time in a life that suddenly felt very small and very lonely. Tomorrow, I told myself, tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow they would realize what really mattered. But deep down, I already knew better. The next morning brought the same routine: blood pressure checks, medication, bland breakfast that tasted like cardboard. I'd spent a restless night hoping my phone would ring, that maybe Sarah or Marcus had thought better of their cold responses. But the phone sat silent on my bedside table, as abandoned as I felt. Dr. Martinez stopped by during her morning rounds, her expression more optimistic than I felt. "Your numbers are looking much better, Benjamin. Another day or two of monitoring, and we should be able to send you home." Home? To what? An empty house where no one would check on me, where I'd recover alone, hoping my heart didn't give out again while I was sleeping. "That's good news," I said, trying to match her enthusiasm. "Do you have someone who can stay with you for the first few days? Family member? Close friend? It's really important that you're not alone during the initial recovery period." I nodded automatically. "Yes, of course." The lie came easily, a practiced response to avoid the pity I saw in people's eyes when they realized how alone I really was. After she left, I tried to distract myself by watching television. The morning shows were full of their usual cheerful nonsense: cooking segments, celebrity gossip, weather reports. I was about to change the channel when a breaking news banner scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "And now, for some incredible news that's sure to make someone's day very special," the anchorwoman said, her smile bright and practiced. "Last night's Powerball drawing has produced a single winner of the $37 million jackpot. The winning numbers were 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, and the Powerball number was 18. I barely paid attention at first. I'd never been much of a gambler, but occasionally I'd buy a lottery ticket when the jackpot got big enough to make headlines. It was more habit than hope, something to do while standing in line at the grocery store. 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, and 18. Something about those numbers made me pause. They sounded familiar, though I couldn't place why. I reached for my wallet on the bedside table, fumbling through the leather folds with hands that still shook slightly from the medication. Behind my insurance card and driver's license, I found it, a crumpled lottery ticket from 3 days ago. I'd bought it at Murphy's Corner store on my way home from the hardware store, the same day I'd had the heart attack. The numbers were faded, but still readable. 7, Margaret's birthday was July 7th. 14, the date we'd gotten married. 23, Marcus's birthday. 31, Sarah's birthday. 42, my age when Margaret died. And 18, the number of years I'd raised the children alone after losing her. My hands began to tremble as I compared the numbers on my ticket to what the newscaster had announced. 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, and 18. They matched, every single one. I stared at the ticket, certain I was seeing things wrong. The medications, the stress, the emotional trauma of the last few days. Surely I was confused. I checked again, slowly this time, matching each number carefully. 7, check. 14, check. 23, check. 31, check. 42, check. And the Powerball, 18, check. The ticket slipped from my fingers and fluttered to the white hospital blanket. $37 million. I was holding a ticket worth $37 million. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. Yesterday, I was lying in this bed feeling like the most worthless, unwanted man in the world. My own children couldn't be bothered to visit their father who'd nearly died. I'd felt like a failure, like all those years of sacrifice and love had meant nothing. And now I was a millionaire, 37 times over. I picked up the ticket again, studying it as if the numbers might change. But they remained the same, the dates that had defined my life, now defining my fortune. Margaret's birthday, our wedding day, the children's birthdays, the day my world had shattered when I lost her, and the number of years I'd spent trying to be enough for 2 parents. The morning talk show had moved on to a cooking segment, something about preparing healthy meals for seniors. I turned off the television and sat in the silence of my hospital room, holding what might be the most expensive piece of paper I'd ever touched. Part of me wanted to call Marcus and Sarah immediately, to share this incredible news, to maybe bridge the gap that had opened between us. Surely something this extraordinary would change things. Surely they'd want to celebrate with their father, who just won the lottery. But another part of me, a part that had been growing stronger since yesterday's phone calls, held back. What exactly would I be celebrating? The money? Or the possibility that my children might suddenly find me worth their time again? I thought about Sarah's words. My life has been so much better without constantly worrying about you. It can ask out. Would $37 million change that sentiment? Would it make me less of a toxic relationship and more of a valuable asset? The questions made my chest tight in a way that had nothing to do with my heart condition. I folded the ticket carefully and slipped it back into my wallet. For now, this would be my secret. I wanted to see what happened next, wanted to understand who my children really were when money wasn't a factor. Because if $37 million was what it took to make them care about their father, then I already had my answer about the kind of people they'd become. A different nurse came in to check on me, someone I hadn't seen before. She was older, maybe in her 50s, with graying hair and tired eyes that spoke of too many shifts and too many patients. "How are we doing today, Mr. Benjamin?" she asked, checking the machines connected to me. "I've had better days," I said. "And worse ones too, I suppose." She smiled at that. "That's a good way to look at it. I'm Linda, by the way. Patricia's covering a different wing today." "Nice to meet you, Linda. Any family coming to visit today?" she asked while making notes on my chart. The question hit me like a physical blow, but I managed to keep my expression neutral. "They're very busy people." Linda stopped writing and looked at me directly. "You know, I've been doing this for 28 years, and I've learned something important. Sometimes the people who should be here aren't, and sometimes the people who show up surprise you completely. What do you mean? I mean that family isn't always blood, Mr. Benjamin, and blood isn't always family. You'll figure out who your real people are, usually when you least expect it. She finished her notes and headed toward the door, but paused before leaving. For what it's worth, you seem like a good man. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. After she left, I sat alone with her words echoing in my mind. Who were my real people? For the last 25 years, I'd assumed it was Marcus and Sarah. They were my children, my legacy, the reason I'd worked so hard and sacrificed so much. But maybe Linda was right. Maybe blood wasn't always family. I looked at my wallet again, knowing that tiny piece of paper inside could change everything. $37 million could buy a lot of things: houses, cars, vacations, comfort. But could it buy love? Could it buy the kind of family I'd always thought I had? More importantly, did I want to find out? The afternoon stretched ahead of me, full of questions I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. But one thing was becoming clear. This lottery ticket wasn't just about money. It was about truth. And truth, I was beginning to realize, could be more valuable than any jackpot. Outside my window, life continued as normal. People walked by on the sidewalk below, living their lives, dealing with their problems, loving their families. None of them knew that 6 floors up, a man named Benjamin was holding a winning lottery ticket and wondering if it would save his family or finally show him who they really were. The heart monitor continued its steady rhythm, but for the first time since my attack, I felt something other than pain in my chest. I felt curiosity. And maybe, just maybe, a tiny spark of hope. I woke up the next morning to the sound of my phone buzzing against the plastic bedside table. The digital clock read 7:15 a.m., earlier than anyone in my family had called me in years. Still groggy from the pain medication, I fumbled for the device. Marcus. My heart actually skipped a beat, not from the cardiac condition, but from surprise. Dad? Dad, are you there? His voice was different somehow, urgent in a way I hadn't heard since he was a child afraid of thunderstorms. I'm here, son. What's wrong? Wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Dad, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I feel terrible. Absolutely terrible. I was under so much stress at work, but that's no excuse for not being there for you. I sat up straighter in the hospital bed, confused by this sudden change in tone. Marcus, you don't need to. No, Dad, I do need to. I've already called my boss and told him I'm taking family leave. Family comes first, always. I don't know what I was thinking yesterday. I'm coming to see you right now. Before I could respond, he'd hung up. I stared at the phone, wondering if I'd somehow called the wrong number. This couldn't be the same son who'd dismissed my heart attack as an inconvenience just 24 hours ago. The phone buzzed again. Sarah this time. Daddy. Her voice was soft, almost childlike. She hadn't called me Daddy since she was 12 years old. Daddy, I'm so sorry about yesterday. I was having such a bad day, and I took it out on you. That was horrible of me. Sarah, what's going on? Yesterday you said, I know what I said, and I hate myself for it. I was talking to David last night, and he made me realize how awful I sounded. My therapist always says we hurt the people we love most when we're in pain ourselves. I love you so much, Daddy. I'm coming to see you today. The line went dead again, leaving me staring at the phone in bewilderment. Both of my children, who yesterday couldn't spare 5 minutes for their hospitalized father, were now rushing to my bedside with apologies and declarations of love. Something wasn't right. The phone rang again. Marcus. Dad, I'm in the car now. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Do you need anything? Coffee? Breakfast? I could stop and get those pastries you like from Rosenberg's Bakery. Rosenberg's had closed down 3 years ago, but I didn't correct him. Marcus, you really don't need to. Don't be silly. I want to be there. We need to talk about getting you the best care possible. Money's no object when it comes to your health. Money's no object. That was interesting, considering yesterday he'd been too busy with his career to even have a proper conversation. The phone rang again before I could process what Marcus had said. Sarah. Daddy, I'm leaving work early today. I told my supervisor that my father needs me and nothing else matters right now. I'm bringing the kids too. They've been asking about Grandpa, and I realized I've been keeping them away from you for too long. This was definitely not the same daughter who'd called me a toxic relationship 24 hours earlier. Emma and Jake, my grandchildren, hadn't visited me in over 6 months. Sarah always had excuses. They were busy with school, sports, friends. Now suddenly they'd been asking about me? That's wonderful, Sarah. I'd love to see them. Of course you would. What kind of grandfather wouldn't want to see his grandchildren? I don't know what's been wrong with me lately. I think I need to adjust my medication or something. After she hung up, I sat in the quiet hospital room, trying to make sense of what was happening. Yesterday, I was the loneliest man in the world. Today, both of my children were racing to my bedside, canceling work, bringing grandchildren, offering to spend money on my care. The only thing that had changed was the lottery ticket hidden in my wallet. But how could they possibly know about that? I hadn't told anyone. The ticket was still in my possession, unclaimed. The news report had only mentioned that someone in the city had won, not who or where. Unless I pressed the call button for the nurse. Linda appeared within minutes, looking concerned. "Is everything all right, Mr. Benjamin? You look troubled." "Linda, has anyone been asking questions about me? Any visitors or phone calls from people who aren't family?" Her expression shifted slightly, and I caught a flicker of something that might have been guilt. Well, actually, there was something yesterday evening. One of the nurses from the day shift, I think it was Patricia, she was talking to her sister on the phone during break. Her sister works at Murphy's Corner store, the place where they sold the winning lottery ticket. My blood ran cold. What did she say? "Oh, probably nothing important. You know how people talk. Patricia mentioned that you were here and her sister remembered you buying a ticket the day you had your heart attack. They were just speculating about whether you might be the winner, since the timing matched up and all." I closed my eyes, feeling a mix of anger and devastating clarity wash over me. "And Patricia's sister might have mentioned this to other people?" Linda shifted uncomfortably. "You know how small communities are, Mr. Benjamin. Word travels fast, especially when it's exciting news like someone local winning the lottery. But I'm sure it's just harmless gossip." "Harmless gossip, right. Thank you for being honest with me, Linda." After she left, I understood everything. The nurse had connected the dots between my heart attack and the lottery ticket purchase, told her sister, who probably told everyone who'd listen. In a community this size, it wouldn't take long for that information to reach Marcus and Sarah. They didn't know for certain that I'd won, but the possibility was enough to transform them from indifferent children into devoted caregivers overnight. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Dad, I'm in the parking lot. I brought flowers and some of those magazines you like about woodworking. Can't wait to see you." I hadn't touched a piece of wood in 5 years, and Marcus knew that. But apparently, the potential lottery winner version of me was someone worth remembering details about. Another text from Sarah. "Almost there, Daddy. Emma made you a get well card, and Jake picked out a teddy bear for you. They're so excited to see their grandpa." The same grandchildren who had been too busy to visit were now excited to see me. Amazing how $37 million could cure a child's busy schedule. I heard voices in the hallway outside my room. Familiar voices, but with an energy and enthusiasm I hadn't heard directed toward me in years. Marcus was talking to someone at the nurse's station, his voice loud and jovial. "Yes, I'm Benjamin's son. I came as soon as I could. He's such an important man in our family, We all depend on him so much." Important man. Yesterday I was an inconvenience. Today I was important. Sarah's voice joined the conversation. "We're just so grateful he's okay. I don't know what we'd do without him. He's the heart of our family." The heart of the family. The same woman who'd told me her life was better without me was now calling me the heart of the family. A tap on my door interrupted my thoughts. Marcus peered around the corner, his face bright with a smile I hadn't seen in years. "Dad, thank God you're all right." He rushed into the room carrying an enormous bouquet of flowers and what looked like a gift bag. "I've been so worried about you." Right behind him came Sarah, practically glowing with concern and affection. "Daddy." She leaned down to hug me, something she hadn't done since her wedding day. "You look so much better than I expected." Behind her, my two grandchildren peeked shyly around the doorframe. Emma, now 8 years old, held a handmade card decorated with hearts and flowers. Jake, 6, clutched a small brown teddy bear. "Hi, Grandpa," Emma said softly. "Mommy said you were sick." "I'm much better now that you're here, sweetheart," I said, and I meant it. Whatever their parents' motivations, seeing my grandchildren was genuinely healing. Marcus set the flowers on the windowsill and pulled a chair closer to my bed. "Dad, we need to talk about your care when you get out of here. Sarah and I have been discussing it, and we think you should come stay with one of us until you're fully recovered." "Oh yes," Sarah chimed in, settling into the chair on the other side of my bed. "You can't be alone right now, it's not safe." The concern in their voices was so perfectly performed, I almost believed it myself. Almost. "That's very thoughtful of you both," I said carefully, "but I'm sure I'll be fine at home." "Nonsense," Marcus said, his voice firm. "Family takes care of family. I've already started looking into private nurses, physical therapists, whatever you need." "Money's no object when it comes to your health," Sarah added, echoing almost exactly what Marcus had said on the phone earlier. I looked at my children, really looked at them. Their expressions were earnest, their voices warm, their attention focused entirely on me. If I didn't know better, if I hadn't experienced their cruelty just 24 hours earlier, I might have believed this transformation was real. But I did know better, and I was beginning to understand something important about the lottery ticket hidden in my wallet. It wasn't just worth $37 million. It was worth the truth about who my children really were when they thought there was something in it for them. "You're both being so wonderful," I said, smiling at them. "I'm just curious, what changed your minds about visiting me?" They exchanged a quick glance, so brief I almost missed it. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, her voice just a little too innocent. "Yesterday you both seemed so busy. Today you're here with flowers and teddy bears and talk about private nurses." Marcus laughed, but it sounded forced. "Dad, yesterday we were in shock. Sometimes it takes time to process something scary like this. We just needed a night to realize what really matters." "Exactly," Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Family is everything. I was just scared yesterday, you know? Sometimes fear makes us say things we don't mean." I nodded slowly, filing away their explanations. "Well, I'm just grateful you're here now." And I was grateful. Grateful to finally see them clearly. The lottery ticket had given me something more valuable than money. It had given me the truth about my children's love and what it was really worth. The transformation in my hospital room was remarkable. What had been a sterile, lonely space just hours earlier now buzzed with activity and attention. Marcus had repositioned the furniture to create what he called a family gathering area. Sarah had somehow procured a small coffee maker and was brewing what she claimed was my favorite blend, though I'd never expressed a preference for a Colombian dark roast in my life. The children, Emma and Jake, sat on the fold-out couch that Sarah had demanded the hospital provide. They colored quietly in new coloring books that Marcus had apparently picked up during one of his 3 trips to the hospital gift shop that morning. "Dad, I've been thinking," Marcus said, settling into his chair with a legal pad full of notes. "We need to discuss your living situation. That house is too big for you now, especially after a health scare like this." I raised an eyebrow. "The house I've lived in for 30 years? The one you both grew up in?" "Exactly," Sarah jumped in, her voice bright with manufactured enthusiasm. "It's full of memories, but memories don't keep you safe. You need to be somewhere with people who can look after you properly." They'd clearly rehearsed this conversation. I could see it in the way they finished each other's thoughts, the way their arguments flowed seamlessly from one to the other. "I've been researching assisted living communities," Marcus continued, consulting his notes. "Some really nice places, Dad. Golf courses, social activities, 24-hour medical staff." "Assisted living?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Son, I'm 63 years old and I had a heart attack, not a stroke. My mind is perfectly fine." "Of course it is," Sarah said quickly. "We're not questioning your mental capacity, Daddy. We just want to make sure you're safe and comfortable." "And close to family," Marcus added. "There's a beautiful place called Sunset Manor, about 10 minutes from my house. You could see the grandkids all the time." Sunset Manor. I knew the place. It was expensive, very expensive. The kind of place that required a substantial entrance fee and monthly costs that would eat through savings quickly. Unless, of course, someone had recently come into $37 million. That's very thoughtful, I said carefully. But I'm not ready to give up my independence just yet. They exchanged another one of those quick glances. Sarah reached over and patted my hand with exaggerated tenderness. We understand, Daddy. Change is scary. But we're not talking about giving up your independence. We're talking about upgrading your lifestyle. Exactly, Marcus nodded enthusiastically. Think of it as early retirement living. You've worked so hard all your life, you deserve to be pampered a little. Early retirement living. With what money? My factory pension and Social Security wouldn't cover a week at the kind of place they were describing, but apparently they thought I had other resources now. Can I ask you something? I said, looking between my two children. Yesterday, when I called to tell you about my heart attack, neither of you seemed particularly concerned about my well-being. What's changed? The room went quiet, except for the soft scratching of crayons on paper from the children's corner. Marcus cleared his throat. Dad, I told you yesterday was just shock. Sometimes when we're scared, we react by pushing people away instead of pulling them closer. Is that what happened? I asked. You were scared? Terrified, Sarah said, her eyes glistening with what appeared to be genuine tears. When I hung up the phone yesterday, I immediately regretted everything I said. I called David crying, told him I was the worst daughter in the world. And I couldn't concentrate on anything at work, Marcus added. I kept thinking about how I'd feel if something happened to you, and the last conversation we had was me telling you I was too busy to care. Their explanations were smooth, well-rehearsed, and completely plausible. If I didn't know about the lottery ticket, if I hadn't overheard Linda's revelation about the gossip, I might have believed them. Well, I'm touched by your concern, I said. Both of you taking time off work to be here means a lot to me. Actually, Marcus said, his voice taking on a conspiratorial tone, I've been thinking about taking a longer leave of absence, maybe even early retirement myself. Really? That's quite a change from yesterday's talk about launching a new campaign. He waved dismissively. That stuff seems so unimportant now. Life's too short to spend it in conference rooms when I could be spending time with family. Sarah nodded vigorously. I've been thinking the same thing. Emma and Jake need their grandfather in their lives more than I need my career. I might cut back to part-time, spend more time bringing them to visit you. The same grandchildren who'd been too busy to visit for 6 months were suddenly going to be regular fixtures in my life. How convenient. Grandpa, Emma said, looking up from her coloring book, Mommy says you might move to a new house with a swimming pool. Did she now? I looked at Sarah, who had the grace to blush slightly. I was just telling them about Sunset Manor, she said quickly. They have a beautiful aquatic center. And Daddy says you might take us on a big vacation, Jake added, not looking up from his drawing. Like to Disney World or maybe even Hawaii. Now I looked at Marcus, who was suddenly very interested in his legal pad. A vacation? That sounds expensive. Well, he said, not meeting my eyes, I thought maybe we could all take a family trip together. Celebrate your recovery, spend some quality time together. Money shouldn't be an obstacle when it comes to family memories. Leonos, money shouldn't be an obstacle. This from the man who yesterday was too busy with his career to visit his father in the hospital. A nurse I didn't recognize poked her head into the room. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Benjamin has visitors at the desk asking about visiting hours. More visitors? Sarah asked, sounding pleased. Dad, you're certainly popular today. Who is it? I asked the nurse. A Mrs. Rodriguez and her daughter. They said they're neighbors. Mrs. Rodriguez, the woman who'd found me on my kitchen floor 3 days ago. I hadn't expected her to visit, but it was a genuinely kind gesture from someone who barely knew me. Please send them in, I said. Marcus and Sarah immediately began rearranging themselves, making space for the new visitors while maintaining their positions as devoted children. The performance was about to have a larger audience. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway moments later, a woman in her 70s with silver hair and warm brown eyes. Her daughter, Maria, was about 40, dressed in scrubs, probably a nurse herself. Benjamin, Mrs. Rodriguez said, her face lighting up. Oh, thank goodness you're looking better. I've been so worried about you. Mrs. Rodriguez, this is such a surprise. Thank you for coming. Please call me Elena after finding you on your kitchen floor. I think we're past formalities. She approached my bed with a small container. I brought you some of my homemade soup. The hospital food is terrible, I'm sure. That's incredibly kind of you. Sarah immediately stood up, extending her hand to Elena. I'm Sarah, Benjamin's daughter. We can't thank you enough for finding him when you did. And I'm Marcus, his son, Marcus added, also standing. We're so grateful for your quick thinking. Elena shook their hands politely, but I noticed her expression had changed slightly. There was something in her eyes, a flicker of confusion, maybe even surprise. It's wonderful to meet you both, Elena said carefully. Benjamin talks about his children sometimes when we chat over the fence. He does? Sarah asked, her voice bright with interest. Oh, yes. He's mentioned how successful you both are, how busy with your careers. I got the impression you lived quite far away. Marcus laughed. Not that far, just across town, really. Elena's eyebrows rose slightly. Across town? Oh, I must have misunderstood. Benjamin always seemed to think it was much further than that. I could see Marcus and Sarah processing this, trying to figure out what narrative I'd been sharing with my neighbors about our relationship. Well, distance is relative, Sarah said with a forced smile. Sometimes even across town can feel far when you're caught up in the day-to-day routine. Of course, Elena said, but her tone had cooled noticeably. I imagine you've both been here constantly since the heart attack. Benjamin must be so comforted by your presence. Another pause, another exchange of glances between my children. We got here as soon as we could, Marcus said. This morning, Sarah added. We've been here all morning. Elena looked confused. This morning? But Benjamin had his heart attack 3 days ago. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma and Jake continued coloring, oblivious to the tension, but every adult in the room understood what had just happened. Elena had inadvertently exposed the fact that my devoted children had only appeared today, not 3 days ago when their father nearly died. Marcus began, then stopped. There were complications with travel, Sarah said quickly, and we didn't want to overwhelm him while he was in intensive care. Elena nodded slowly, but I could see she wasn't buying it. She'd been a mother herself. She knew what real parental concern looked like, and she was smart enough to recognize a performance when she saw one. Well, Elena said, her voice polite but distant, I should let you get back to your family time. Benjamin, you rest and get better. Maria and I will check on your house while you're away. Thank you, I said, for everything. After Elena and Maria left, the room felt different. The magic of my children's sudden devotion had been tarnished by the uncomfortable questions of someone who actually knew me, who understood the reality of my lonely existence. Nice neighbors, Marcus said, trying to recapture the earlier warmth. Very nice, I agreed. Elena's the one who probably saved my life. We should send her flowers, Sarah said, or maybe something more substantial. A gift card to a nice restaurant. Always eager to spend money now. How times had changed. I looked at my children, still performing their roles as devoted offspring, still maintaining their caring facade, despite the awkward encounter with Elena. They were committed to this charade, and I was beginning to understand just how far they might be willing to go to maintain it. The lottery ticket in my wallet felt heavier than ever. It wasn't just a piece of paper anymore. It was a test that my children were failing more spectacularly with each passing hour. But I wasn't ready to end the performance just yet. I wanted to see how elaborate their show would become, how much they were willing to sacrifice for the possibility of $37 million. After all, if I was going to lose my children, I might as well understand exactly what I was losing them to. By the evening of my 4th day in the hospital, my room had been transformed into what looked like a luxury hotel suite. Marcus had somehow convinced the staff to allow a small refrigerator, claiming I needed special dietary supplements. Sarah had brought in plants, claiming they would improve my oxygen levels. The windowsill was crowded with flower arrangements from various businesses around town, all ordered and paid for by my suddenly generous children. Dr. Martinez had cleared me for discharge the next morning, news that my children received with what appeared to be genuine distress. "So soon?" Sarah asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "Are you sure he's ready?" "His heart function has stabilized beautifully," Dr. Martinez explained. "At this point, he'll recover better at home than here. Just needs to take it easy for a few weeks." "Of course," Marcus said quickly. "We'll make sure he has everything he needs. Round-the-clock care if necessary." After the doctor left, my children immediately began discussing arrangements for my homecoming. They spoke about me as if I weren't sitting right there, planning my life with an enthusiasm that was both touching and deeply unsettling. "I think the first priority is getting a cleaning service," Sarah said, making notes on her phone. "The house needs to be spotless for his recovery." "Agreed," Marcus nodded. "And we should probably have groceries delivered, set up meal delivery service. Dad shouldn't be worrying about cooking or shopping." "What about transportation?" Sarah continued. "He shouldn't be driving yet. We could hire a driver, or maybe get him one of those rideshare accounts." They were spending money like it was water, making plans that would cost thousands of dollars without any discussion of who was paying for it all. The assumption seemed to be that somehow these expenses would be covered. "You're both being incredibly generous," I said quietly, "but I'm not sure I can afford all these services." They both looked at me with expressions of surprise, as if the concept of money being an issue had never occurred to them. "Dad," Marcus said gently, "don't worry about expenses right now. Your health is the priority." "Besides," Sarah added with a bright smile, "you've always been so good with money. I'm sure you have plenty saved up for emergencies like this." Plenty saved up. Right. As the evening wore on, I found myself growing tired. The excitement of the day, the constant attention, the performance of gratitude I'd been maintaining, it was all exhausting. I told my children I needed to rest, expecting them to gather their things and head home. Instead, Marcus pulled out a small overnight bag. "I'm staying the night, Dad. I don't want you to be alone." "That's really not necessary," I said. "The nurses check on me regularly." "Nonsense," Sarah said, settling into the reclining chair. "I'm staying too. We can take shifts." "Both of you? That seems excessive." "Nothing's excessive when it comes to family," Marcus said firmly. "Besides, we need to discuss some important things." After the children fell asleep in the visitors' area and the hospital grew quiet, I found myself staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had changed in just a few days. The lottery ticket felt like it was burning a hole in my wallet, this secret that had transformed my relationships so completely. Around midnight, I heard hushed voices from the hallway. At first, I thought it might be nurses doing their rounds, but then I recognized the voices, Marcus and Sarah. They thought I was asleep. "We need to be careful," Sarah was saying, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can't seem too eager?" "I know," Marcus replied, "but we also can't let him make any major decisions without us being involved." "Do you think he's already claimed it?" "I don't know. If he had, wouldn't he have said something by now?" "Not necessarily. You know how he is about money. Remember when Mom died and he wouldn't even tell us how much life insurance there was?" There was a pause. Then Marcus spoke again. "The important thing is making sure we're positioned as his primary support system. If he hasn't claimed it yet, he's going to need help managing that kind of money." $37 million, Sarah breathed. "Can you imagine? We have to be smart about this. If we push too hard, he might get suspicious. Do you think he knows that we know?" "How could he? We've been perfect today. Concerned, loving, attentive." "I just feel bad about yesterday," Sarah said, though her tone suggested the guilt was more practical than emotional. "If he remembers how I talked to him, he seems to have forgotten about that. People forgive a lot when you show up with flowers and grandchildren." My heart sank as I listened to their conversation. Any remaining hope I'd harbored that their sudden devotion might be genuine evaporated completely. They weren't here because they loved me or felt guilty about their neglect. They were here because they believed I was worth $37 million. "What if he gives it all away?" Sarah asked suddenly. "You know how he is about charity." "He won't," Marcus said confidently. "Not if we handle this right. We just need to make sure he understands that family comes first. And if he does something stupid, like leaving it all to that neighbor lady who found him, that's why we're here, Sarah, to make sure that doesn't happen." They were quiet for a moment. Then I heard footsteps moving back toward my room. I quickly closed my eyes and tried to regulate my breathing, pretending to be asleep. The next morning, my children resumed their performance with renewed energy. They'd apparently spent the rest of the night planning because they arrived with a detailed schedule for my recovery period. "We've worked everything out," Marcus announced cheerfully, pulling out a printed calendar. "Sarah will stay with you Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'll take Tuesday, Thursday, and weekends." "You're going to take turns babysitting me?" I asked. "Not babysitting," Sarah corrected quickly. "Supporting, making sure you have everything you need." "What about your jobs? Your families?" "We've both arranged extended family leave," Marcus said. "This is more important than work." Extended family leave. For jobs they'd been too busy to leave yesterday. Dr. Martinez arrived with my discharge papers, and suddenly, the room was a flurry of activity. Marcus had arranged for a private car service to take me home. Sarah had packed all the flowers and gifts into neat containers. Even Emma and Jake, who'd arrived early with their mother, were carrying small bags of my belongings. "It's like moving a celebrity," one of the nurses joked. As we prepared to leave, I caught sight of Elena Rodriguez in the hallway. She was visiting her husband, the patient in the room next to mine. Our eyes met, and she approached. "Benjamin, I'm so glad to see you being discharged. You look much better." "Thank you, Elena, and thank you again for everything you did." She glanced at Marcus and Sarah, who were busy organizing my transport, then leaned closer to me. "I hope you know who your real friends are," she said quietly. "Sometimes when people think you have something they want, they act very differently than usual." The words hit me like a physical blow. Elena might not know about the lottery ticket specifically, but she was clearly intuitive enough to sense that something had changed in my family dynamics. "I'm learning," I said softly. She patted my arm gently. "Good. Take care of yourself, Benjamin. And remember, kindness that comes with conditions isn't really kindness at all." As we left the hospital, I sat in the back seat of the luxury car Marcus had hired, watching my children chat excitedly about their plans for my care. They'd thought of everything: meal services, cleaning help, medical equipment, transportation. They'd created an elaborate support system designed to keep me comfortable, and more importantly, keep them close to me. But as Elena's words echoed in my mind, I realized that all of their kindness came with the biggest condition of all: the belief that I was worth $37 million. The question was, what would happen when they discovered the truth about what I planned to do with that money? I fingered the lottery ticket in my wallet one more time, knowing that soon I would have to make a choice. Claim the money and live with the knowledge that my children's love was for sale, or find another way to reclaim my dignity and discover what family really meant. The car pulled into my driveway, and I saw that Marcus and Sarah had been busy even beyond the hospital arrangements. My lawn had been freshly mowed, my windows cleaned, and there were signs of recent repairs to my front steps. "Surprise," Sarah said brightly. "We wanted everything to be perfect for your homecoming." Perfect. Everything was perfect, except for the one thing that mattered most: the authenticity of the love surrounding me. But I wasn't ready to confront that reality just yet. First, I wanted to see just how far this performance would go. I wanted to understand exactly what $37 million could buy and what it would cost me in return. The test was far from over. 3 weeks had passed since my discharge from the hospital, and my house had become unrecognizable. Marcus and Sarah had transformed it into what they called a healing environment, complete with medical equipment I didn't need, furniture I hadn't asked for, and services that cost more per week than my monthly pension. They'd been true to their word about taking shifts. One of them was always present, hovering with medications, prepared meals, and constant questions about my comfort. They'd hired a housekeeper named Rosa, who came twice a week, a meal delivery service that brought gourmet food I could barely finish, and a private nurse named Helen, who checked my vitals daily despite my protests that I felt fine. The attention was suffocating. More telling were the subtle ways they'd begun inserting themselves into my financial life. Marcus had offered to help organize my banking, suggesting we add him as a co-signer on my accounts for emergencies. Sarah had brought forms for me to update my will, claiming it was important to have everything current after a health scare. They were positioning themselves, preparing for what they believed was coming, but I had been preparing too. That morning, I told Sarah I needed to run some errands and would prefer to go alone. She immediately objected, citing doctor's orders about not driving, stress levels, and the importance of supervision. When I insisted, she reluctantly agreed, but made me promise to call if I felt the slightest bit unwell. My first stop was the lottery office downtown. The building was modest, unremarkable, the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing unless you had business there. I'd called ahead and made an appointment with a claims specialist named Mrs. Chen. "Mr. Benjamin," she said, greeting me warmly in her small office. "I understand you have a winning ticket to claim?" I pulled the crumpled lottery ticket from my wallet, the paper soft from weeks of handling. She examined it carefully, checking the numbers against her computer system. "Well," she said, looking up with a smile, "congratulations. You're now $37 million richer. How would you like to proceed?" "I need to discuss the options for distributing the money," I said. "Of course. Are you interested in the lump sum or annual payments?" "Actually," I said, "I'm interested in donating it." Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. "Donating the entire amount?" "Yes. I've given this a lot of thought over the past few weeks. I want to establish a fund for cardiac research at the hospital where I was treated, in memory of my late wife, Margaret." She nodded slowly. "That's quite generous, Mr. Benjamin. Are you certain about this decision?" "Completely certain." The paperwork took 2 hours. When it was finished, I was no longer a millionaire, but I was something better. I was free. My next stop was Elena Rodriguez's house. She answered the door with a warm smile that faltered when she saw my expression. "Benjamin, is everything all right?" "Elena, I was wondering if you might have time for a cup of coffee. There's something I need to tell someone, and I think you're the only person who might understand." She invited me into her kitchen, a cozy space that smelled of cinnamon and coffee. As she prepared our drinks, I told her everything. About the lottery ticket, about my children's sudden transformation, about the conversation I'd overheard in the hospital hallway. Elena listened without interrupting, her expression growing sadder as my story progressed. "Oh, Benjamin," she said when I finished. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry," I said. "Today I did something that's given me more peace than I've had in years. I donated the money." Her eyes widened. "All of it?" "Every penny, to cardiac research in Margaret's name. She would have approved." Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "What will you tell your children?" "The truth, tonight." That evening, Marcus and Sarah arrived for what they believed was a routine family dinner. Marcus had brought takeout from an expensive restaurant, another gesture designed to show his dedication to my care. Sarah had brought Emma and Jake, claiming they'd been asking to see Grandpa. After dinner, as the children played in the living room, I asked Marcus and Sarah to join me in the kitchen. "I have something important to tell you both," I began, settling into my chair at the small table where we'd shared thousands of meals over the years. They immediately leaned forward, their faces bright with anticipation. This was the moment they'd been waiting for, the conversation they'd been maneuvering toward for weeks. 3 weeks ago, the day after my heart attack, I discovered something interesting, I continued. I had bought a lottery ticket, and it turned out to be the winning ticket for $37 million. Sarah gasped dramatically, her hand flying to her chest. "Daddy, are you serious?" Marcus stood up abruptly, his face breaking into a huge grin. "Dad, that's incredible. When did you find out?" "The day you both called to apologize for not visiting me in the hospital," I said quietly. They both froze, the implications of that timing hitting them simultaneously. "You've known this whole time?" Sarah asked, her voice smaller now. "I've known this whole time," I confirmed, "and I've been watching you both very carefully." Marcus sat back down slowly. "Dad, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I understand now why you suddenly became such devoted children, why you took family leave from jobs that were too important to leave for your father's heart attack, why you've been hiring services and making plans and positioning yourselves as my primary caregivers." The color drained from Sarah's face. "Daddy, I heard you talking in the hospital hallway," I continued. "I heard you discussing how to position yourselves, how to make sure you were involved in any financial decisions, how to prevent me from giving the money away. The silence that followed was deafening. From the living room, I could hear Emma and Jake laughing as they played, innocent of the confrontation happening in the kitchen. "Dad," Marcus said finally, his voice tight, "I think you might have misunderstood what you heard." "Did I?" "Let me tell you what I understood. I understood that when I was lying in a hospital bed, possibly dying, my son was too busy with work to visit, and my daughter told me her life was better without me. I understood that the moment you thought I might have money, you both became loving, devoted children again." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were from guilt or from fear of losing what she thought was coming to her. "We love you," she whispered. "Do you?" I asked. "Do you love me, or do you love what you think I'm worth?" Neither of them answered. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folder of papers from the lottery office. "Well, here's something that might help clarify things." Marcus practically lunged for the papers. "Are these the claim forms?" "Dad, we should really go over these together, make sure everything's handled properly." "No need," I said calmly. "I already handled everything properly." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, the money's gone." "Gone?" Marcus's voice cracked. "What do you mean, gone?" "I donated it, all $37 million, to the Cardiac Research Fund at the hospital in your mother's name." The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was the sound of dreams dying, of carefully laid plans crumbling, of masks finally being ripped away. Marcus stood up so abruptly his chair fell backward. "You what?" "I donated it this morning. The paperwork's all filed. The money's been transferred. It's done." "Are you insane?" Sarah screamed, jumping to her feet. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "Yes," I said calmly. "I've just found out who my children really are." Marcus was pacing now, his hands running through his hair. "Dad, please tell me this is some kind of joke. Please tell me you didn't actually give away $37 million. "I'm not joking, son." "But why?" Sarah demanded, tears streaming down her face. "Why would you do something so stupid?" "Because I wanted to see if you loved me or if you loved my money. Now I know." The transformation was immediate and complete. The loving, devoted children of the past 3 weeks vanished, replaced by the cold, calculating people who had dismissed me in my hospital bed. "This is unbelievable," Marcus said, his voice filled with rage. "We've been killing ourselves, taking care of you, spending our own money on services for you, rearranging our entire lives, and you just threw away our future?" "Your future?" I asked quietly. "It was never your money, Marcus. We're your children," Sarah shouted. "That money should have been our inheritance." "Should it? Based on what? Based on 3 weeks of fake concern after years of neglect?" Marcus stopped pacing and turned to face me, his expression cold. "You know what, Dad? Sarah was right the first time. Our lives are better without you in them." "At least now I know where I stand," I said. Sarah wiped her tears angrily. "Come on, Marcus, let's get the kids and go. There's no point in staying here anymore." They gathered Emma and Jake quickly, making excuses about having to leave early. The children seemed confused by the sudden change in mood, but didn't protest as they were hustled out the door. Marcus paused in the doorway, looking back at me with something that might have been hatred. "I hope you're happy, Dad. I hope $37 million worth of charity was worth losing your family." "It was," I said honestly, "because I didn't lose my family today. I discovered I never had one." After they left, I sat in my kitchen in the silence they'd left behind. For the first time in weeks, I was alone in my own house. No hovering children, no paid caregivers, no performance of concern and devotion. It was the most peaceful I'd felt since my heart attack. The next morning, Elena knocked on my door with a fresh pot of coffee and homemade muffins. "How did it go?" she asked gently. "About as expected," I said, inviting her in. "They're gone." "I'm sorry, Benjamin." "I'm not," I said, and I meant it. For the first time in years, I know exactly where I stand with everyone in my life. And where's that? I looked around my house, free now of all the expensive additions my children had imposed on my life, surrounded by people who care about me for who I am, not what I might give them. Elena smiled. "You know, my husband and I have been looking for a fourth person for our weekly bridge game. I'd like that very much." Over the following weeks, I established new routines, made genuine friends, and discovered what it felt like to be valued for myself rather than my potential worth. The Cardiac Research Fund sent me updates on their work, and I felt proud knowing that Margaret's name would be associated with something meaningful. Marcus and Sarah never called again. I heard through neighborhood gossip that they'd told people I'd developed dementia, that I'd given away money that should have supported the family. It was easier for them to paint me as mentally incompetent than to admit they'd revealed their true nature. I didn't mind. I'd learned that sometimes the most expensive lesson is the most valuable one. $37 million had bought me something priceless, the truth about who loved me and who didn't. And in the end, that truth had set me free.